Hello, I'm Dylan.
And I'm Keon.
And this is Triple Play, that podcast with a 10-minute seizure sequence. Because this week we watched The First Purge.
Written by James DeMonaco.
Directed by Gerard McMurray.
And released on July 4th, 2018. 2 years to the date that
Election year was released.
I
believe so. So
a very new movie, newest movie we've watched for this podcast.
Of course, because it just came out. It was Insidious 4, and now it's this. And we just want to say, like our Insidious episode, Insidious The Lost Key, since this is a movie that was like just released like a month ago when this goes out, and some people might still be wanting to see it, this is what should be an obvious spoiler warning. We're going to spoil some pretty big plot points in this movie, so if you don't want that, probably turn off the episode and come back to it after you've seen the movie.
Right, and I believe I watched it a couple weeks ago, so I think I watched it...
A week and a half, I think you watched it
I watched it a week from last Tuesday,
so about a week and a half.
Like a week after it came out, I think. 6 days after it came out.
I watched it yesterday. So...
I was thinking, like, maybe I watched this release week. Maybe I contributed to this thing's box office.
I mean, we both technically contributed to its box office.
Box office, but I was thinking maybe I contributed to, like, its first week box office.
Technically 5 other people in the theater since I went with my friend, but it was 4 other people and then me and my buddy. That was all the people in the theater watching this movie. And, it was great. Because we got to the movie theater, the movie was supposed to start at 12:05. We got there at 12:10. I always arrive a few minutes late because there's trailers.
Yeah.
Went into the theater, it was just pitch black, and the screen was just black. And we were like, Then about 12:20, they played the little AMC, like, thanks for coming to the movie thing, and then it was just a black screen again. And then this lady came in, she's like, sorry, we're having some projection troubles. It's going to be like 10 more minutes. And I was like, great. And then they went out, and then they played the little AMC thing again, and there was black screen again. And then they played the AMC thing again, and then the movie started. And this was about 12, I want to say like 35, that the movie finally started.
Wow. Well, you and I saw it at the same theater, but at different times. And this theater always has problems with their projectors and just playing movies.
Which is so weird because then I
that's
don't
what they're
remember
there to do.
I don't remember them having any trouble before AMC bought them.
Well,
because they didn't used to be an AMC. They bought them about a year and a half ago, I want to say. It was like February of 2017 that this movie theater got bought by AMC.
It was at least before that, but I think they didn't rebrand to AMC until then because I saw...
Because it used to be a Starplex.
Right, because I saw Ghostbusters there around the end of 2016. Mm-hmm. They had problems with their sound in that movie. Actually, there were just like a couple of 5-minute sequences in that movie where there were just no sound. So they gave us free tickets after the movie, but those tickets we could use those tickets at any AMC.
So you went to the really high quality one.
Yeah, so I went to the $20 AMC because this is like what, $7 AMC?
$4.50 before 3 o'clock.
Yeah, well,
which is when I went.
I saw this at 7 because I'm not available until like after 7. So I saw this at 7 by myself. And
that $20 AMC now is actually worth the money because they have reclining seats that have seat heaters in them.
Well, I don't give a crap about that stuff, but it was really worth it seeing Ghostbusters there because I paid I think it was $5 at the time, so I paid $5 and got a free $20 ticket.
The only problem I ever had at this theater before was when I went to go watch Winnie the Pooh, and this was actually hilarious. I don't think I've told this story on the podcast before.
I don't think so.
Okay, maybe not. We went to go watch Winnie the Pooh, and it was on the same screen that the previous week.
Is that the 2011 one?
Yeah, that was the previous week they'd shown On Stranger Tides, the Pirates of the Caribbean movie, on that same screen.
Uh-huh.
And so they started playing On Stranger Tides instead of Winnie the Pooh, which was hilarious because there were a whole bunch of little kids in the audience, first off. And second off, On Stranger Tides starts with this really creepy sequence with this dead body, like, washing up ashore. And then it's revealed that it's not dead, and he, like, wakes up, and it's, like, pitch black. So
like, oh God, the 100-Acre Wood is taking a dark turn since the 60s. Or 70s or whenever.
And I just sat there like, I'd be okay watching this movie again. And some dad got up and ran out of the theater to go tell them they were playing the wrong movie, and it was hilarious.
There's kids crying.
They were like,
wow. Oh God.
So if you've ever watched On Stranger Tides, you know exactly how spooky that opening scene is.
Christopher Robin will think again before he trespasses.
Winnie the Pooh pulls out a shotgun. Christopher Robin will think again before he comes around here. Tigger's got Glocks.
We don't appreciate humans around these parts.
Stay away.
Oh, God.
Anyway, the First Purge.
The First Purge. So we can continue actually talking about this sort of movie-going experience for a while. So I went in. This was like 7:15 or 7:30 at night on like a Thursday. So obviously there weren't that many people here. Unlike when we watched Insidious: The Last Key in theaters, this was
There was a lot of people for Insidious for me.
Well, for me there weren't really many, but that was at least somewhat of an annoying audience. There was at least there's at least somewhat of a reaction in the audience for me. And even then, I remember when I watched Insidious, it wasn't too big of a deal. There wasn't too much of a reaction from the audience. But here, there was just nothing. There were I think maybe 4 or 5 other people in there, and they were just calmly there eating their popcorn, watching the movie.
I think the only person who reacted to this movie was my friend who I saw it with, and every jump scare, like, whoa! And I was like, I am completely unfazed. Wow. Every time Skeletor would pop out, and be like, whoa.
There were a few jump scares in this that got me. One thing I liked about this movie is that there were actually some scary things in it that weren't jump scares, but we'll get there. I didn't get carded for this.
Neither did I.
And I don't remember if I got carded for Insidious. I think I did.
I didn't.
I think I did. I had a beard when I watched this, though, and still do, so that's probably why.
Yeah, probably. They're like, this guy's a beard. It's probably
fine.
It's probably fine.
And it was high school students working there at like 7 at night who probably just wanted to go home, so they didn't give a shit.
Yeah. I get carded for the weirdest movies. I get carded for like the R-rated comedy, but then the like R-rated bloody movie. Nah, you're good, bro.
I went to
I guess they just really don't want me seeing tits or penises.
I went to watch Gone Girl at that same theater, actually. I think this was when I was 18. I think that movie came out when we were 18. Mm-hmm. But I was about to pull out my ID because, like, oh, yeah, I'm 18 now. I can just pull out my ID and just see this R-rated movie. And I was about to pull it out. I was like, no, I don't care, dude. Just go in. I was like, oh, man.
Didn't you see it at this same theater?
Yeah, I did.
This was before it was owned by AMC. Anyway, now we can get to the plot. And it opens up with... Okay, so the title cards... there were 2 title cards in this movie, and they irritated me because the first one refers to the First Purge as The Experiment, and then the second one refers to it as The First Experimental Purge. I was like, why didn't you just call it The Experiment on the second title card, too?
I think it was a shortened name for it or whatever.
But they should have called it The Experiment on both title cards because I really like this idea that they introduced at the end of the movie because they're like, oh, people are starting to call it The Purge now. At the end of The Purge is when they started to call it The Purge, and before that it was always just The Experiment. Right.
And I really like the opening to this movie. There's sort of these scenes of people getting interviewed who are going to be taking part in the experiment, and we'll explain how that goes down later. Mm-hmm. But there are also, things interspliced like media coverage of what this is going to be, and there's riots and there's protests, and I've seen the other Purge movies, so if you've seen the other ones, you know how this is going to turn out. So I really liked this sort of ominous feel, like throughout the whole movie, but especially in this opening sequence, like this isn't going to end well.
Yeah, they had a pretty good ominous feel going out through this whole movie, and you can feel like something's going to go real bad. Like at any moment, this whole thing is just going to go sideways. And at the very end in the credits, the guy's like, we're going to have a nationwide purge next year.
Right, and not only in this movie itself, but if you've seen the other ones, like the ramifications of what this one night is going to do like to the rest of the country. And that's something that's really cool that this movie does really well.
There is one plot hole that they open at the end of the movie, in my opinion, that I'm going to talk about when we get there.
We'll get there. One of the last lines of the movie is, I forget his name, the
Big D. We're talking about Big D.
Big D. Is that the gang leader's name?
It's the gang leader, Dimitri, who's in that relationship with Naya. Big D. Yeah.
One of the last things Dimitri says is like, we survived the night. Now we have to deal with what comes next. Like, it's not over.
Right. But that was kind of my plot hole because Dimitri figures out that the government is killing people, but like this is a big reveal they have in the second and third movies. The government has killing squads that are killing people, especially in the third movie. It's supposed to be this big reveal that nobody knows about this, but at the end of the first movie, the first Purge, actually, they're leaving this character alive who knows this, who can...
Right. Well, maybe Dimitri joins what's-his-name's cause from the second one.
I think it would have been interesting if Dimitri
was the guy from the second one.
The second one.
That could have been cool.
And then after this, he's leading this crusade because he's like, well, now we fight.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that's... Well, first of all, I just want to say, like, I don't have a problem with what other people call, quote-unquote, plot holes most of the time, but that's another story. I don't think this is necessarily like a plot hole as something that's just not touched on. It comes at the end of the movie. It's just something that, it's there. There's stuff to be expanded on there. But, whatever. It doesn't really matter to me. I love the beginning of this movie. As soon as this started, I was like, "Oh, this is awesome! I'm so on board with this." And basically, for the first 20 or 30 minutes, I was really enjoying this movie. It sort of dropped off a little bit after that.
There was a steep drop off as soon as we get the title card 1 hour before the first experimental purge, and then I was like, "Well, okay."
Nah, I think I liked it a little longer than that. I still do like the movie overall, but I really liked this.
I place it below the third one for sure. I place it about on par with the second one.
I place it as the highest one. My ranking, I think, since we're talking about it now, is this one, the first Purge, the Purge election year, the Purge Anarchy.
Oh, mine is at the top of the election year, and then second, it's kind of the first Purge and Anarchy kind of tied. And then the Purge, the bottom, just like in another league.
This is something we can just say across the board right now. This one had the best acting of any Purge movie.
Yeah, this one had the best acting by far. And one of the actors was in Doctor Who. Check out Trust Your Doctor, our Doctor Who podcast.
Yeah, Isaiah was in Doctor Who.
Twice.
Another Blumhouse, Doctor
Blumhouse.
Who. Blumhouse. What? I'm going to keep calling it Blumhouse.
Blumhouse.
I don't care. Doctor Who crossover, not crossover,
crossover?
No, not cross-contamination, cross-casting.
Anyway, so we meet the main players. We have Naya, who's the sister of Isaiah, and then we have Dimitri. Those are the big players, and then there's Dr. Updale and the senator, who I don't remember his name.
There's Dimitri's friend, who's sort of just...
there.
He's like the awesome sidekick who's like more awesome than the main guy.
Dimitri's pretty awesome. There's like an implication that Dimitri's ex-military, too.
I didn't get that. But basically who these people are...
I mean, his sidekick is actually ex-military. Yeah. Like, he basically explicitly says it.
Dimitri he sort of runs...
A gang.
On
Staten Island.
Staten Island, that's where the experiment is taking place, at Staten Island. Isaiah is working for Dimitri unbeknownst to Naya. He just started...
And unbeknownst to Dimitri.
Yeah, unbeknownst to Dimitri, too. He's just started selling on one of Dimitri's corners.
This dude Skeletor shows up and slices him.
Well, Naya is Isaiah's sister. She was formerly in a relationship with Dimitri. Mm-hmm. And Dimitri wants to keep Naya and Isaiah safe from his criminal activity and from the Purge.
And Skeletor.
Skeletor was recently released from prison, I think.
Yeah.
And it's the first thing he does is he walks up to Isaiah and slashes the hell out of him.
He spits a blade out of his mouth, too, to do that.
Oh, does he? I don't remember that.
Yeah.
I don't remember him spitting the blade.
My buddy was like, what the f***? He'll beat that out, but... Yeah, because Skeletor just goes, you need, like, some remedies or something, and I'm the practicing... I'm the general practitioner, and he spits out a blade and then grabs it and slices his neck.
I can't believe they named this guy Skeletor, right? Like the He-Man villain.
Every time he shows up, I just couldn't take him seriously because of that, because I was like... Hey, it's Skeletor.
He is kind of off his rocker, though, so maybe he just, like, watched He-Man. He's like, I'm Skeletor now.
I guess.
So this was really interesting to me, because as soon as Isaiah gets attacked, the guy, his friend or whatever, like, just pulls out a gun and starts shooting Skeletor as Skeletor runs away. And, this is a neighborhood where it's like a dangerous place, right? Like, people just pull out guns, start shooting, and, there's people selling drugs all over the place. And to me, this was really interesting. The Purge has always touched on, and this is something like that I for sure, and you, I'm guessing since we live in the same goddamn place, like, this is not my experience at all. I've never, like, experienced anything like this. I've grown up, like...
I have.
Yeah. And maybe you can, like, add to this, but I've grown up, like, upper middle class, like, all my life. We live in, like, one of the safest cities in America, for God's sake, and, like, this is not something that I've ever, like, dealt with personally. So seeing this, and I think this movie drives home the idea that, like, the Purge is really affecting... The Purge, like, is just a government tool to, like... Depopulate.
Yeah. No, it does. I have some...
that targets lower class people.
My experience is not living in a neighborhood where kids can just pull out guns and shoot each other, but South Africa was not safe.
It wasn't here, right?
Every house had barbed wire or electric fencing, and if you didn't, you were going to get broken into, for sure. We had 2 cars stolen straight out of our driveway We had bars over all our windows, because if you don't have bars over your windows get smashed. People will come through them. Every store had gates or bars over the windows.
Right.
It just wasn't a safe place to live. And that's honestly kind of why part of the reason why I hate LA is because parts of LA just remind me about the bad parts of Johannesburg, and I just don't want to remember that time. Because it was like you drive down the street, and if you have your window like even a little open, someone could run up to you at the stoplight, smash your window, grab your purse off your lap, and just run away. Like, that's a thing that happens.
Yeah. Huh.
When we went back to visit, my dad was like, make sure you keep all your doors locked at all times when you're in the car. Don't roll down your windows. Like, that's just how you got to live when you're there. And you can carve out, if you have a lot of money, you can carve out a decent enough life for yourself there. But, like, I mean, it's similar in a lot of ways to this. Like, it's just crime just everywhere. Just, like, omnipresent throughout everything. And this movie does a good job of, I think, demonstrating that. Maybe it goes a little over the top.
In what way, would you say? Before the purge kicks in, because
before the purge kicks in, it's like
entirely.
Before the purge kicks in, they're just on the street corner. Would he really just pull out a gun and shoot at Skeletor on the street corner in full view of like everyone?
Well, that's the thing, because nobody really reacts to this, and that like drove home to me like, wow, must be, because nobody freaks out, nobody really runs. There is a little bit of it, but like that's like just a thing that happens.
I guess the other way they go over the top, I mean, during the purge, but this is something they have outside of the purge, is all the cars have like neon lights underneath. They've got like I want to say like 60 people on the gang's payroll, like just guarding places. Like 20 people are just guarding the main
Dimitri
money
is
place.
Freaking loaded. I mean, just look at his like his how, I don't know what his like pad or what his house is. His
like
villa. No,
his
it's not a villa. It's not a villa. It's his
villa rest stall. Check out Sign Up Lake 7 podcast.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it just does a good thing of driving home.
That's
this
to me
idea.
Also why Dimitri is a cool character, because there's a scene later on. Naya actually, I was thinking about this before the scene, but Naya actually explicitly points this out in her dialogue. She's like, Dimitri is kind of doing what the Purge does. He's feeding on like the poor people to make loads and loads of money and to make his life better, which is like, you know, the Purge gets rid of poor people and supposedly
minorities.
and minorities, and in this universe makes people's lives better, which we mentioned. Allegedly. We talked about in episode 19, or when we talked about the other Purge movies, that probably wouldn't necessarily be the case if it were real, but it's not real. It's a movie. Yeah.
I mean, even when Dimitri shows up, moving ahead in the plot of it, Dimitri shows up at the sign-up location for getting money to participate in the Purge. You get $5,000 if you just stay on Staten Island during the Purge. And Naya's like,
hide in the bushes for
Naya's
12
like,
hours.
oh, are you here to sign up? I mean, 12 hours of lawlessness. That's good for you, right? He's like, nah, I don't like it.
Naya is like involved in a protest here.
Yeah. Not that she really does anything with that later on in the movie. Like, that doesn't really come back at all.
Well, it establishes that she's very anti-Purge.
I guess. Anyway, the Purge starts. Let's just skip ahead over a couple of things, because there's a couple of things that happen that aren't really important, but the Purge starts.
And Isaiah wants to get revenge on Skeletor, so he participates.
Yeah.
But he doesn't tell Naya. He tells Naya he's going to some relative's house or something like that.
They give them these spooky contacts that light up their eyes.
Contacts, and I want to talk about these contacts for a minute, because this was cool. So what these are...
Made this movie a lot more science fiction.
Right, they did. They're camera contacts, so you put them in and they record everything. And they have this entire team monitoring everything at all times. And this was cool because it reminded me of those science fiction shows like UFO, and a lot of other shows do this, where it's like, and even Blake 7 does this in episodes like Duel, where it's really tense and it's awesome, but what the scene really is just people sitting at control panels saying stuff. But somehow, like in a lot of these shows, I don't know if you've watched any UFO. I haven't watched really anything except a couple clips and like an episode. I haven't really watched. I will one day, but I haven't watched front to back. But they do that in this show. They do that in that show, and it's really cool. Well, they kind of do it here as well.
Updale is trying to be a legitimate scientist about this. And the senators are like, yep, well, Halfway through the night, he's like, yep, well, it's not working, so let's just kick it into high gear and take over.
Right, but just to touch back on these contacts for a second, they light up in all different colors. But when Isaiah first puts them in, which is when we first see them in action, they're bright blue, right? And he puts them in, and we get this image, right, of like this black kid, and I think importantly also a black male with blue eyes. Yeah. And I mean that might not be like the most like subtle of imagery, right? But in some ways I think it's more complicated than, just because that seems to be like a very simple image, right? Like the black male, blue eyes. There seems to be something like, I hate actually using this term, but like being said there about that. And it seems like actually quite simple, right? But I read this, and I don't read comics, but I might start because I read this comic and really enjoyed it. But I read this comic by Victor LaValle, who is a novelist. So he just wrote the comic, and I don't know who did the art, but it was a team called Destroyer, which is actually a really cool comic. The premise of it is that in this universe, Victor Frankenstein and the creature are real, so it takes place in like the Frankenstein universe, and they both survived at the end of Frankenstein, and Victor Frankenstein's last descendant is killed. He is a 12-year-old boy who's killed when a woman makes an anonymous call, because he's coming home from baseball practice and he has his bat hanging over his shoulder or whatever. He's black, and a woman makes an anonymous call and says, "Oh, there's a black male walking around my neighborhood with a gun." So he's shot by the police, killed, and his mother brings him back using nanotechnology, and the creature shows up, and it gets really cool and interesting after that. I really check it out. I don't even read comics, and I loved it. So even if you don't read comics or anything, it's really cool. But when the kid, I forget his name, in that is brought back to life by his mom as like this human nanobot hybrid thing, he has blue eyes. And there's all sorts of stuff going on in that comic about like, and baseball is really used as like a heavy symbol in the comic about, because the kid, he just wants to, as it's like this American thing, right? And also specifically like this white thing, right? Like, I mean, there's a history of that as well. And the kid, the last descendant of Victor Frankenstein, is like this kid who loves baseball, and at the end of the movie, his mom is, or not movie, comic. The mom is like, to spoil it, or I'll spoil it, whatever. Her consciousness gets downloaded into him. There's this huge fight between the mom and the dad. The dad is also like a robot, and it's really cool. But the mom's consciousness gets downloaded into the kid's body, and she's like, all right, here's what you got to do. You have to, the mom wants to like, this is way oversimplification, but the mom wants to destroy America. It's not as simple as that, but read the comic. And the kid is like, all right, mom, she gives him this list of instructions of what he has to do. And he's like, all right, I get all that, mom. Like, I get where you're coming from, and I'm going to follow through with all of that. But right now, all I want to do is just watch the game. And he goes into a movie theater, and he starts watching a Little League baseball game, which is, there's a lot going on there. And we're not talking about that comic, so I'm not going to go too much more into it than I already have. But that striking image reminded me so much of that. And I think there's actually a lot more going on in this movie than just one watch was able to. I mean, it's more than likely actually a reference to the Toni Morrison novel Bluest Eye, which I've never read, but. Yeah, I've read Beloved from Toni Morrison. Yeah. There's also. Bluest Eye is actually, as far as I know, a more famous book from her, but we read Beloved in high school, so. I don't know. Beloved has been called the greatest American novel of all time, so that's why it's really I just remember my English teacher being like, oh, do you guys all know Bluest Eye? I'm like, no. She was like, oh, we're written by the same person who wrote this book we're reading now, Beloved. There's actually a line in Beloved, the very last two lines of Beloved, actually, that are related to this, and it's also related to trauma theory and how, in some ways, slavery in the U.S. is the national trauma. And for anyone who studied trauma theory, a big idea is that trauma it has both a silence is paradoxical. It has both a silencing effect, and the only way to not get over it, but the only way to continue to deal with it is to keep going back to it. But it has a silencing effect, so you can't do that. Yeah. The last two lines of Beloved are really cool, which it's the same line twice. It was a story that, this isn't verbatim, but it's something like, it was a story that couldn't be passed on, which is like, the double meaning of that is really interesting and really cool. And once I finished Beloved, I was like, so when I first started reading it, I was like, whatever, people call this the greatest American novel of all time. Like, yeah, it's probably, whatever. It's probably not. I read it and I was like, okay, I kind of get it.
I kind of get it.
There's also this story by Mark Twain called Pudd'nhead Wilson, which was basically largely ignored for like 100 years, but has really come to prominence, and it's my favorite book from Mark Twain, which is about a slave who switches her baby with her master's baby because they both look almost identical. And
well, that's kind of weird, honestly.
It's a really good. You can read the book probably in a couple hours. It's only like 100 pages, like 2 hours.
It's almost like Mark Twain
read,
took the story about the Prince and the
he wrote The Prince and the Pauper.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. He took his story and was like, put it in a...
Pudd'nhead Wilson is just the greatest hits of Mark Twain, and it's awesome.
Well, anyway, back to the movie at hand. He tries to go kill Skeletor, but he fails. So
Skeletor kills the first person of the night, as far as anyone knows.
Yeah. There's apparently
this guy,
a lot
the first crime we see, I want to mention this because it's funny, is this guy like getting revenge on an ATM. He's like, eat my chain, or...
That's what I would do, honestly, during the purge. I'd just go rob a bank or something. Screw killing people. Get out of my way, I'm robbing a bank.
And people, this is actually shown in this movie more than the other Purge movies. The other one's really focused on murder, but this is one who's like, yeah, we're going to rob this store or something.
Because that was the whole point of this movie, in fact, was that nobody was killing each other except for Skeletor, who was just crazy.
Yeah.
Because Dr. Updale was like, man, I predicted a lot higher rate of participation. I'm going to have to study this data and see what's going on, because they see all these parties going on, and people are just partying and just like doing petty theft. And she's like, this is kind of interesting, actually. And so then like in the middle of the night, killing starts ramping up, and that's because the Senator's called in killing squads.
And then like the last hour is just mass chaos.
Because she's like, this is weird. I predicted like a massive...
They predicted the opposite of what actually happened.
She predicted a huge surge at the beginning and then it dying off over the course of the night. But now, because of these killing squads that the Senator calls in, there's this huge jump in the middle of the night. She's like, I'm going to have to study this data. And then she figures out that it was the Senator, and then they just have her killed. So
yeah,
that's her entire plot line. Felt kind of bad for her dying at the end. From one scientist to another, I was like, I can feel that. You were trying to be a legitimate scientist. But on the other hand, your science experiment was, let's eliminate laws and see what happens in a lawless society.
Right. I mentioned this on Zenith. I listened to this interview recently with Chanda Prescott-Weinstein, who's a theoretical physicist. And one of the things she says in that interview, again, not verbatim, is that science doesn't decide what science is used for, which I don't know how true that largely is, but probably pretty true.
I mean, they touch on a similar idea in this movie because Dr. Updale's like, science doesn't follow political laws.
Right. But here, like the morality and validity of this experiment is kind of like questionable. It's like, well, your scientific experiment is like doing this, so whatever.
I mean, as an experiment, it's quite an interesting experiment because it's kind of like, do we really know what would happen in a lawless society? Well, no. And that's what I guess her thought was like, psychologically, what's going on in like a lawless society where we just let people just run wild and do whatever they want? What would happen? Well,
you also have to like really narrow down what you mean by law, because there's like de facto law, de jure law, and all other types of like laws that can arise. So I guess just eliminating written law, or not even law itself. This is like law conceptually. There's this story by Kafka called Before the Law that I think is related to this, and I don't want to get too deep into that. It's like a one-page story. You can read it in a couple minutes. It's really cool. And it's related actually to the Purge with what the law, like how the law is not an abstraction, but yeah, in some ways an abstraction, but also it takes on, the law like takes on a life of its own when really... Not really. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Like, it can take on a life of its own regardless of the ramifications of anything.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and I don't have too much to say about law, frankly, except for Martin Luther King had a lot to say about what's a just law and what's an unjust law. And if it's an unjust law, we should rise up and overturn it.
Right. There's also, I think, from Kant, I think this is Kant when he was talking about whether just quote unquote just ends can ever justify unjust means, and I think the decision he comes to is that he does this like he does this in like a form of a mathematical proof, I think, almost, is that like unjust means can never result in a just ends or something like that.
Yeah, but that gets into a whole philosophy thing where it's like, well, how do you define just
Right,
means
these are all
and
like
unjust?
right. These are all like bigger
means
questions of
and,
philosophy that I
like,
have
do you
no
look at it from a
idea
utilitarian standpoint or an egalitarian? Or it gets really deep into philosophy. Law, I think, is inherently rooted in philosophy, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyway, the whole point is like, what's going to happen if we just eliminate, if we allow crime, basically?
Or if there's no punishment for crime.
Yeah.
Crime and Punishment, one of
anyway.
my favorite books.
Anyway, the rest of the plot is like Dimitri. After the killing squads come out, Dimitri starts to figure it out because they kill off a bunch of Dimitri's men.
But this is where I started to like the movie a little less. But also, I can appreciate that this movie is like, it's a combination almost of all of the other 3 Purge movies, but like kind of distilled. And I think this has something to do with the change of director, because I don't think this is a movie that DeMonaco could have directed. We'll touch on that a little bit later.
DeMonaco did write it, though.
He did write it. And I think that resulted in a stronger movie having a different writer and director other than DeMonaco doing both. But what I sort of liked about this mid movie, these middle sequences of the movie, they're running through the streets, there's chaos, there's action. It's a lot like Anarchy and Election Year. But there's also confined stuff. There's, well, first of all, the sort of pseudo-philosophical stuff that the first one barely touches on. But there's also there's a scene where Isaiah is like confined. He's running through the dark spaces, and I think that was actually done better than the version of it in the first Purge movie.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so, absolutely.
Yeah, so I really like the sort of distillation of like, all right, we're going to have like this enclosed hunt almost of Isaiah, and we're going to have, Isaiah and what was the sister's name? Naya running through the streets and stuff. There's the scene with the water gun is really cool. I really like that scene.
The scene with the water gun was such a troll. It's like also what I feel like more people would do during the Purge, because the guy pops out and he's like threatened to kill them, and then he pulls the trigger and it's just a water gun, and they're like, wow, really, man? And he runs off cackling into the night. I think it almost went too overboard, though, because they're like, they dress the freaking killing squads in KKK outfits in Staten Island, New York.
Yeah, here's my question. Yeah, the question of like where that's actually interesting, like almost thematically, is that like these people are appearing in Staten Island, New York, and if you're just a witness to this, then you're gonna be like, oh shit, like these people were here all along and we never knew it, because I don't know how prevalent like actual KKK both members and dress is like in the state of New York. Probably not totally non-present, but probably nothing like the South really, but or even here in California. But at the same time, I'm questioning like why the government decided to do that. Why they decided to have the squads like waving Confederate flags and stuff like that.
Yeah, the big like the cross that the KKK have on like flags that they're flying on their vehicles, and
maybe it's probably to
even like out of universe is what I want to say. I think they went too far making this movie, because you see the killing squad that enters the tenement block at the end, and the guy pulls off his mask, and he's just straight up like he just looks straight like what Hitler envisioned the master race would look like. He's got blonde hair, he's got blue eyes, he looks very Germanic.
Oh yeah, when he's getting strangled at the end, yeah. That's true.
And I think they just went
Wasn't he Russian though? He was the Russians. They called in the Russians, so.
But they were mercenaries from all over.
Then again, not all Russians are like blonde hair, blue eyes. So whatever.
But anyway, I just think like out of universe, I think they went too far with this, making it like they tried to make it a very like white versus black thing.
Yeah, maybe they did go a little. Because
they're dressing these people in Ku Klux outfits. They've got this guy that looks exactly like Hitler's imagining the Ubermensch is going to look like.
Yeah, maybe, but I mean, going back to that in-universe question for a minute, maybe to like to prevent people from like getting clued into like, hey, it's the government killing you. They're like, oh, well, it's the KKK, it's neo-Nazis, it's pro-Confederate people.
I mean, they've always touched on this too with the killing squads in the other movies, because there's they had the neo-Nazi looking dudes in the.
Yep.
I think it was the third one in this.
Yeah, it was the third one.
But in this one, it was like Straight up, it's the Ku Klux Klan boys. Yeah. Here they come. They're coming for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure, like, you know, people who want to kill others are going to, like, sign up for this thing, right? Like,
for the Purge,
but
not necessarily for the Ku Klux Klan. At least...
Well, I mean...
Why would you sign up for the Ku Klux Klan?
No. Like, I mean, the Purge. Like, KKK member who's like, yeah, I want to, you know, kill people is, like, likely to want to sign up for this.
There's a subplot too where one of Dimitri's subordinate decides to purge because he wants to try kill Dimitri and take over his business, but then Dimitri finds out and just kind of shoots him in the face.
Right.
It went really poorly for him. And Dimitri doesn't have to hide his body or anything. Do you think I think there's body cleanup crews, in my personal opinion, that show up the next day after the purge and clean up all the bodies, because, like, you don't have to hide the body when you kill someone on the purge, right?
No, you don't.
The reason why you hide a body is so you don't get caught, but you don't care if you get caught during the purge.
I mean, unless you're like, oh man, you know, the local government and cleanup crews are gonna have to deal with this afterwards.
You feel bad.
I don't want to
killed
make
someone, but you feel bad.
Yeah, maybe.
You feel bad for the local government.
Anyway, Isaiah this is going back a little bit, but Isaiah was at a Purge party, which is a massive, like, block party.
Yeah.
And he confronts Skeletor, but he can't kill Skeletor. And this is before him and...
He's too weak.
And Naya, yeah, if you want to call it that. Him and Naya are running through the streets and everything. Eventually they make it to the church, which is where a bunch of 14 characters were hanging out, as well as Naya.
So
but they all get massacred,
they're
except for a
by
couple
KKK
people.
members.
Yep.
They make it back to their tenement building, which is being purged at the very end of the night, because at the start, the news reporter was interviewing the senator. It's like, well, you know, we're looking at this tenement building because it's like the center of the community. So if there's high participation here, we'll consider a success.
Right.
So at the very end of the night, they send in these groups to just basically kill everybody floor by floor.
It ends with a long and actually really cool action sequence. I liked how this was shot.
Very John Wick inspired, actually. When I was watching, I was like, because John Wick was not original in the way that it shot action, but I think it came at an opportune moment and kind of revolutionized, in its many ways, action movies right now, because before, action movies was just silly, over-the-top things. And in John Wick, you get this very brutal...
continuous shots.
You get continuous shots, but you get very brutal, like, realistic fights where you see John Wick reload after shooting 6 times, or if he drops a gun, he starts fighting hand to hand, and it's very realistic. There's not a lot of cuts. It's very single shot type stuff, and I think that kind of revolutionized action movies now, because since John Wick, a lot of action movies have been doing it like this, some to less success than John Wick. And I think this movie directly, like this action scene, I watched it and I was like, this is directly John Wick inspired. Like the way that it's very single shot, the way that it's very brutal. You don't get a lot of cuts between different scenes in the fight. You see him strangle. The stairway scene was almost straight out of something like Atomic Blonde. There's a stairway fight that's very similar.
I haven't seen John Wick, but I question, just knowing what I know about that movie franchise, I guess, because there's John Wick 2, was Keanu really the right choice for John Wick?
Yes, actually. That movie would not have worked without Keanu, honestly. If you watch the movie, I think it becomes immediately obvious that if they had cast anyone else in that role, it would not have worked at all.
Okay, well, I'll have to see. I'll probably watch that movie eventually, especially if they make a third one.
They are making a third one, so it'll be on this podcast at some point.
Yeah. But, you know, the guy who's called the kindest, like, guy and most mild-mannered guy in Hollywood, you got to wonder if he was right for the part. But I'll have to see.
Well, it's because Keanu's acting is very understated and very, like...
It's subdued.
It's subdued, and also in John Wick, he just kind of has to act angry and really quiet for the whole movie, which is something Keanu does brilliantly.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah, I think Keanu is actually he's really called out for being a bad actor, and I don't think he is really.
We talked about this in our Matrix episode, but I think it comes straight down to the director, really.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I haven't seen, like I mentioned, I haven't seen John Wick. I have seen the Children of Men movie adaptation, which came out in like 2006, I think, and this action sequence actually reminded me of basically the last scene, which is also the last shot, because it's one continuous shot in that movie of this extremely brutal like action sequence in a war zone. And that's a cool movie if you want to check it out.
Never watched it.
Completely different from the book. Completely
Never read
different.
the book either.
They both have the same premise, and then they just do completely different things with it. It's probably good.
Probably good. It's kind of like how I heard the Annihilation movie. You can watch the Annihilation movie and read the book, and they basically took the same premise and did completely different things with those two.
Yeah.
How the movie doesn't spoil the book at all because it's really different, but also really good in its own right. Anyway, Dimitri saves the family from the Nazi-looking bad guy, and at the end of the day, they walk out of the tenement, and they're like, well, now we got to fight. And then it ends,
someone
it
says,
ends on
like,
a shot.
I can't believe we survived, and Dimitri's like, yeah, now we're going to have to keep surviving.
We forgot about the government cheating and using drones to kill off Dimitri's gang. These bastards. Anyway, the movie ends on a shot of a flying American flag, which I thought was definitely trying to say something, in my opinion. We get the credits, and during the credits, we get an interview with the senator being like, next year we're going to have a nationwide purge. Get hyped.
This is something we talked about last month as well. But, like, the Purge movies are becoming, you know, if not more realistic in the things that actually happen, like, more realistic in concept, right? Like, there's so many, it's a weekly occurrence now. There's mass shootings, killings, violence everywhere.
Almost daily, even.
Right. And avert racism that's just brushed over and accepted in situations where even just 5 or 6 years ago, that would not have been like something okay to do. I was thinking about this recently, and this might also be a little bit of a tangent, but I'm wondering, because, I mean, in the past couple of years, I've seen so many more like swastika graffitis and people flying Confederate flags and stuff like that. And, you know, I've been writing it off for the past couple of years, or not writing it off, but I've been like, all right, well, you know, I'm more clued into this stuff now. I'm noticing it more, but like, I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's just noticing. I think it's just more prevalent. But
I mean, that's always a question with something with, especially when you're dealing with a large population. If there's a rise in something, the question is, are we just becoming more aware of it, or is it actually increasing? This is something that I've been reading a lot about with, say, like a mental illness like borderline personality disorder. The question has always been, there are more and more people being diagnosed with borderline every year, but the question is it that there are more instances of that mental illness, or has our awareness of that mental illness just increased? Right,
and that's the same thing for ADD and ADHD.
Yeah, and so with like racism, it's like, are there more people just being overtly racist, or has the national spotlight just suddenly become more attuned to that kind of overt racism? I think to an extent, maybe it's a little bit of a mixture of both.
Yeah, I think it's definitely both.
And I think these movies are clearly trying to make a point about this. Well, especially this one is trying to be like, look, racism is a thing. Racism isn't really okay.
The last shot of the movie, like you said, is the American flag, which, I mean, it makes you wonder, like, questions like, is this like who Americans are? Is this who we are as Americans? And that's a question that's been on people's minds lately with stuff like the issues at the U.S.-Mexico border recently. Like, is this? And that's a question I've heard repeatedly over the last couple of weeks. Is this who we are as Americans? I think that's a question this movie asks, and I think it's a question that needs to be asked. So I really appreciate this movie. But also in that scene, let me just mention this. There's, as you like pan up to that shot of the American flag, there's these kids playing basketball, like down just on a basketball court, and I don't know, man. That was almost creepy to me. Like, you know, all this shit just went down, and like, you know, it's just another thing. People get up and just go about their business after the purge. Like, it's just kids playing basketball on the basketball court.
Well, I think ending on the American flag was very clearly, because the American flag has always traditionally stood for freedom and integrity and equality, right? You know, that's the first line of the Declaration of Independence: all men are created equal.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you just watch this entire movie where they're killing off these minorities, they're killing off poor people. Like, that's the government doing that. That's the American government doing that.
That's the government has never been. That might be the first line, but
but that's my point. Is the government is doing that, and then it pans up to this American flag, which, you know, the flag itself, you know, you're always like, oh, that's a symbol of equality and freedom, but
yeah,
look at what's going on. Like, the whole movie is trying to say, look at what's going on, and then you look at the flag, and it's like, is this what the flag actually stands for?
Right. Which is really cool.
Then we get the senator being like, we're going to have a nationwide purge.
And then we go into the credits.
Yeah.
Now, was there, I don't know how long you stuck around in the credits, but I did for a couple minutes at least. There was a mid-credits trailer for the new
I didn't stick around that long. I stuck around. So there's basically every movie does this nowadays. There's like stylized credits where they do stylized for all the lead actors.
Yeah, that's been a thing for a long time.
And
now.
then there's the little
like
scene with the senator, and then as soon as I got to the rolling credits, that's where I left.
Yeah, that's where I left as well. The movies have been doing that for a while now. You know, there's the important people get like the credits with like maybe a licensed song or a theme song for the movie, and there's stuff going on there.
There's like an artistic interpretation.
Right. And then the rolling credits start, and then it's usually just movie soundtrack.
Yeah.
And then you can leave. But there's a trailer for the new Purge TV show.
Well, there wasn't one in mine. But I did see ads for the Purge TV show when I was at Comic-Con, because I went to Comic-Con for one day this year.
Huh. God, that must have been a nightmare. But
it was a lot of fun, actually. I had a ton of fun.
How were the lines?
I went with someone very special.
How are the lines?
We didn't actually wait in a lot of lines. We only went to one panel. Otherwise, we just kind of roamed the show floor the whole day. We didn't really wait in a lot of the lines.
Huh.
You could spend basically the 4 days just roaming the show floor, looking at the exhibitors if you wanted to.
I guess. Well,
it's a lot bigger than I imagined. I thought it was pretty big, but when I got there, it was massive.
It is the biggest like convention in the world, I think.
So.
I'm not into conventions at all. I basically hate that entire genre. Let's just call it a genre.
A genre?
So, come to think of it, since you didn't see that trailer, I think that was actually an error, because it was just very jankily spliced in. So now that you say you didn't see that, I think it was just
a
mistake. I think it was a mistake, actually. But I watched it. It doesn't reveal too much. It doesn't really... It's more of a teaser. I think it was the same one they released online a couple weeks ago. Looks cool. I'm not going to watch it.
It's a limited series event, so I might watch it just because it's
10
going to be
episodes,
like 10 episodes. Yeah. Maybe. We'll see. Otherwise, I actually don't have much more to say about this movie. I enjoyed it, but not a lot.
I enjoyed it more than the other Purge movies, at least. Some of the stuff I mentioned, I think it was touching on some very cool ideas. Not all that well executed, especially near the end. I do think some things fall apart near the end in terms of, like, we didn't mention this, and this was a big thing in this movie, is if you're watching this in a theater, a large dark theater with a large screen, there's a scene at the end that's going to be pretty painful, because there's this there's an alarm that's going off, and every like second and a half there's a flashing white light, and that was like seizure induced. That hurt. I had to avert my eyes from the screen because of how much that flashing light was getting to me.
Yeah,
and it goes on for like more than 5 minutes. More than 5 minutes at least.
It's painful. Not really necessary.
No.
Didn't have to be that bright, I guess is my point. I get what they were doing for it, because it's like atmospheric, but it's not like a regular light that's like off-white. It's like white.
It's a bright white light. There's some cool things they're doing with it in terms of like a strobe light effect, because this is when Dimitri's like in the hallways killing people, and it's a cool action scene. So like the light goes on, and then all of a sudden Dimitri is like here, and then the light flashes again, and he's on the other side of the hallway killing someone, and so I get like that effect, but still.
It was just irritating.
Other stuff, other than that action scene with Dimitri at the end, some of the stuff with them running around the streets falls apart a little bit the more they keep doing it. I think.
Because there's a lot of it that's really similar. Right. It's just them watching the killing squads killing people.
And the comic relief from the friend, Naya's friend character, I think...
all fell flat on its face. I don't think I laughed once in this movie. I did laugh once, but not at a joke.
What did you laugh at?
I don't remember what it was a joke. I think I laughed at Skeletor's name. Oh, I laughed at how Skeletor died, because I was just like, Skeletor was built up to be this big confrontation between him and Isaiah, and he just runs and he's like, what the fuck? And he just runs in and gets gunned down, and I was like, what?
Skeletor kind of saves the day at the end, or he gives Dimitri the opportunity. But yeah, I didn't necessarily think the jokes were even needed, because I thought that action scene was, like I said, pretty good. So I don't know if they needed the jokes.
Probably not, but they probably used them to try to break up the atmosphere a little bit.
Sure. Anyway, recommendations? I would watch it. I would watch it. Yeah.
If you enjoyed any of the other three, I'd say watch it. As a standalone movie, it also works quite well.
Yeah, you could watch this, or order-wise, I think you could watch this. Come to think of it, I think you could watch the Purge movies in any order, really.
Yeah, because there's not really the only interconnectedness is Frank Grillo's character from the second to the third one, and the mysterious guy in the first three, but there's not like a running through thread between those plot lines.
Right. Even then you could watch Election Year and then go back to Anarchy and say, oh, this is the origin of Frank Grillo's character.
Whatever his name was.
Yeah. But like, I remember when people were walking out of the theater, there was this one lady who was like, oh man, that wasn't like the other Purge movies at all. Like that sucked or whatever. I was like, really? That was pretty good.
You can watch them in any order. And this one works pretty well as a standalone movie and an introduction. Yep. I think you could even watch this one first and be solid.
Yeah, definitely. I think watching this one and then The Purge, the first Purge movie, works pretty well. Like if you just want to watch two of them, you could watch this and then watch the first one. You
could even watch this with basically any of the other ones, honestly.
Actually, you could watch
this one and then with Election Year. That would be kind of cool because you'd have the bookends. You'd have the first and the last.
You could watch any combination of one, any combination of two, any combination of three, or any combination of four of these movies, really.
That's really unique, and we'll never be able to say that again, I think, somehow.
You never know. You never know.
You never know, but I can be pretty sure. Well, so we have an email to respond to for this week.
Yeah!
I think, one of those rare times we get an email on Triple Play. And this one is from Sergeant Drano.
Who, if you listen to our Blake 7 podcast, Zenith is a regular contributor in terms of emails and has been on Zenith as well.
And we actually have two emails, and I'm not going to respond to one of them because it's really just a list of trilogies that we should do. The only thing I want to mention from it is because he brings up the guys who did Italian Spider-Man apparently did a 2-season Australian TV series called Danger 5.
Yeah, I remember reading something about this.
And I was like, maybe we should do a podcast on it. Anyway, it's only 2 seasons, so we'll get through it pretty quickly. And I remember we loved Italian Spider-Man. So I just wanted to bring that up. And he brings up a couple other recommendations: Star Trek Troopers, Mad Max, the Dead Trilogy, Hannibal Lecter, Evil Dead, Feast, Lord of the Rings, Poltergeist, American Pie, and RoboCop.
We do have a long list somewhere.
We do have a long list. It's in this folder, actually, of stuff.
We usually try and capitalize on movies that are coming out. That's why we watch The Purge, at least. Mm-hmm. There's really nothing in November and December, so,
Well, we're doing Predator.
We're doing Predator
capitalizing
next.
on a new Predator movie. Predator is actually something I've wanted to watch for a while, so that works out well.
This November and December are open to the Tim Allen Santa Claus movies, though. So we'll have to decide if we're doing
those. We might
those.
do something else. We'll see. We haven't decided that yet.
To this email.
To this other email that we're going to respond to. Its title is Triple Play Dollars Trilogy. Hey guys, still making my way through. Just finishing your podcast on the newer X-Men trilogy. Skipped Kung Fu Panda because it just didn't interest me. I remember that being quite a good episode. For us, anyway.
I like that trilogy, too.
I think it's wrong to say the Billboard promotes violence against women because look at the context. It depicts a villain assaulting a woman. If anything, the message of the Billboard is this is how villains act. Assaulting women is evil. Context defines everything. That was for X-Men.
Yep.
I think we said something along those lines. Like, this is a bad person. Like, that's the point of the Billboard. But particularly enjoyed your podcast on the Dollars Trilogy, a.k.a. the Man with No Name Trilogy. Sorry if you guys didn't like it more. I feel like it was a pretty big mistake to watch that whole trilogy in a single day.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
I've rewatched Good, Bad, and the Ugly since then, and I was extremely surprised at how fast that movie felt when you haven't watched
the other two.
6 hours of movie beforehand.
I found my thoughts on that trilogy running fairly parallel to Dylan's. My favorite viewing order is 3-1-2, a.k.a. chronological order, since The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is actually a prequel to the other two.
Well, if you subscribe to that theory.
I believe it.
I believe it.
My favorite of the three is actually for a few dollars more. Same. And my favorite character is also the same as Dylan's, the Man in Black. Same. i.e. Colonel Douglas Mortimer. Great man, soldier.
Tuco will never be overshadowed by anyone.
Once known as the best shot in the Carolinas, now reduced to being a bounty killer like yourself. Definitely my favorite Lee Van Cleef role. I really like the plot of 2. Mortimer's journey through 2, as well as the ultimate reveal that Mortimer is not actually in it for the money. He's in it to avenge his sister, raped and murdered by Indio. I love the reveal at the end when you think Indio is about to gun down Mortimer and the second pocket watch starts up, something we didn't even know existed prior to this point in the movie, but Mortimer's immediate reaction to pull out his watch chain and see that it's gone, the realization that it plays the same song as Indio's such perfect and efficient storytelling. Manco in this one mostly serving as the facilitator for justice, not handing victory to Mortimer, but simply making sure it's a fair contest. Great. I love that Manco has Mortimer use his own gun rig in the showdown with Indio. And did you catch that after gunning down Indio, Mortimer does Manco's little spin holster trick with it? Did not catch that. Your mention of Once Upon a Time in Mexico reminded me that would be a great addition to Triple Plays. It is the third part of Robert Rodriguez's, quote, Mexico trilogy, unquote, which is composed of El Mariachi, Desperado, and Once Upon a Time in Mexico. All of them are great films and a lot of fun. Sergeant Drano, Station 7, The Door.
But also potentially part of another Sergio Leone trilogy. Once Upon a Time in Mexico.
That one is made by someone else, because Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in America, Once Upon a Time in
the West. Sorry, yeah, that's what it was. Once Upon a Time in the West, Duck You Sucker, and Once Upon a Time in America.
We could potentially do that trilogy actually next year, because Quentin Tarantino's next movie is called Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and it's supposed to have a lot of references to that Sergio Leone trilogy, and it's about the Marilyn Manson murders.
Pretty sure all Quentin Tarantino movies have references to Sergio Leone movies.
True. But anyway, yeah, I really enjoyed the Dollars trilogy, and looking back on it, I think, it was a mistake to watch them all in one day. We probably should have split them up. But the point of this podcast is to watch them all in one day.
Yeah, for this podcast, I don't think it was a mistake. But in terms of recommendations, don't watch those all in a row.
I think we said that on that episode. Don't watch these all at once.
Yep.
Split them up somehow. Because they're just so long and dense, and you really need to appreciate them on your own, I think. I think if you watch all of them, it's just like sensory overload almost.
And just the sheer length of it all.
Yeah. Kind of like Lord of the Rings. When we
Which
do Lord of the
we're
Rings.
putting off currently.
We keep putting it off because we're going to do the extended editions because we're masochists. But we keep putting it off. One day we will do it, though. And that's going to be a really long podcast episode, too, because there's a ton of information on the making of those movies, too.
Yep.
And then we'll have to do The Hobbit.
Which might even be more painful.
Yeah, because they're apparently really bad.
The Hobbit book is worse than Lord of the Rings. Well, I'll take that back. I'll take that back. Like 2 seconds after I said it, I'll take that back.
You can't unsay what's been said.
Yeah, I don't know. Even the Lord of the Rings book to me wasn't always cracked up to be.
I really liked Lord of the Rings. Well, anyway, if you would like to email us and join the ranks of Sergeant Drano and Stephen Chinder, the only two people who've emailed this podcast, you can reach us at thedoctor@decadentvegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on The Purge as we close out our chapter on The Purge and move into a new one about not
Predator
purging. You can find us on YouTube at Decorative Vegetable. You can find us on Apple Podcasts and Google Play at Triple Play. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook. Trust your doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast and follow us on Twitter. And like we mentioned, next time we're watching the Predator trilogy. But until then, the end.